Dr. Joseph Sarkissian. I'm going to talk a little bit about some interesting stuff. I'll try not to bore you. We're going to look at things at a different perspective. Having a different perspective is very important, not only as a practitioner, but as a human being. If we come out of our box and our indoctrinations and look at something, look at some issue from another angle, I think we will be better humans. For example, as a dentist, I think a dentist should be putting himself in place of a patient now and then and discover, more objective things that go through that process. The same thing with the Mercury issue, which I'll talk about a little bit later, which is why is that the Mercury issue is understood, the amalgam controversy is understood better by toxicologists or doctors or naturopaths and less by dentists who are actually placing them in the mouth. So this thinking out of the box is very important. Just to, ironically by the way, these little sculptures that depict the morbidity and the suffering of toothaches and tooth suffering in general are made of ivory from elephant tusks. But it's ironic that they give us that message through the death of an elephant. But I'm just using this as an example of how ancients or in medieval history the tooth has had a very important role in our system. Teeth are connected to our deepest emotional centers, the limbic system, the brainstem, an area of the brain that doesn't really need cognitive function. It's so important, it's so fundamental in survival that it doesn't have to rely on thinking and on awareness. But that's why we react differently. We start regressing when we go to the dentist. And we have these inner fears that a lot of people have no control over. And this is really what we deal with, because it's not only what has happened in your childhood, but it's what has come through as a collective psychological memory through the generations. We see teeth in different roles in society, in the media, metals, which I'm going to talk to about today. Teeth have importance everywhere, from developing countries trying to solve issues with teeth, with aesthetic issues, with trying to find the right filling material, because they are so important. We underestimate their importance. It's not only for chewing, but it's also important for aesthetics, for expressions, for fighting. In the animal kingdom, a cheetah or a lion would not survive if one tooth was knocked out. Because we can't survive, of course, without teeth. We can blend our food, but we generally can't survive. And I'm also going to talk about a little bit more on the importance of why the structure of teeth is important. Now, this was an interesting archaeological finding that we came across in Science magazine recently that shows that even 6,500 years ago, people were trying to fill teeth with something, anything they could get their hands on, that would more or less alleviate their sensitivity or their cavities that they were having. And that we still strive to find that compatible filling material. We have come a long way. Of course, we have to get over that dogma where we're stuck with amalgams. But on the other hand, we have a lot of technology on biocompatible tooth restoration. As you know, the ancients have used different materials. Egyptians, Phoenicians, The Aztecs have used emerald inlays on teeth thousands of years ago. The Mayas, for cosmetic reasons. This is all dentistry. So coming to metals in general. If we talk about metals, I'm not going to go too much into detail, but metals are really non-natural materials. You don't find metals in nature in their true form, in their elemental form. They're locked in the earth. So when we discovered metals, when these elements were discovered around the mid-19th century, people were fascinated by metals, and of course a lot of elements were discovered, but we still had the Iron Age and the Bronze Age. But we started using alloys and metals for just putting them anywhere we could. And some childish experiment with someone in the 1850s, mixing a little bit of mercury with some silver filings and getting a pliable substance that hardened. Hey, let's put them in teeth. So this 150-year-old technology came on into the 21st century, but we still have all these other metals that are used in dental filling alloys or crowns or bridges in different combinations. Some are noble, some are non-noble, but metals are a completely different form of element. They have an electron cloud that can react to magnetism, to electricity. That can react with our meridian, physiological, our physiological electricity, the subtle electricity in our system. So I believe that metals do not have any role in dentistry or in our bodies, because it puts us one step closer to being a robot. If you look at metals in the media, in Moonraker, Jaws, that huge vicious-looking guy with the metal teeth, or in Breaking Bad, Tuco, the fierce homicidal maniac with his metal teeth. So they use metals as a negative, with a negative connotation. Why are they incompatible? I believe because they are not compatible with the physical characteristics of our teeth in general. They contract and expand more than our teeth allow. So it is really hard to have something restore a tooth that is a biological substance that is made up of 3 embryonic layers. I think the only organ that is made up of 3 embryonic layers. It's an organ, and it's made in such an ingenious way that it will last all our lives, and it will be subject to so much force and so much attrition that it is an amazing product. And we still have to restore it when it breaks down. In primitive societies, they really didn't break down through decay, but they had attrition and tooth wear, flattening. But people had much larger jaws, as Weston Price has proved decades ago, that primitive cultures with primitive foods had much healthier jaw structures, and healthier teeth. Metals also corrode more. Even gold will have parts of that alloy that will slowly corrode or electrically react with other metals or other systems in the electrical nature of our being. They cannot be bonded to teeth, and when I talked about the embryonic layers, dentin is bonded to enamel, which is the outer shell, enamel being the hardest substance in our body. So that bonding has to be there in order for the stability of the tooth to withstand all that pressure, the chewing pressure. Anything you put in a tooth that is not bonded will cause it to weaken and to crumble. Aesthetics, as I said, it has a negative image nowadays in the past few decades. If we look into a mouth, you generally don't look into a mouth like we do every day, but if you see something like this, there are probably at least 12 different metals at work here. each metal reacting electrically, galvanically, as a battery between the other metals. In conventional dentistry, this is not allowed. It's not only in holistic dentistry. Every dental school teaches that those two shouldn't be touching each other. They shouldn't even be in the same metal. This is an alloy that could be anything between cobalt, chromium, nickel, silver, palladium, maybe a little bit of gold. So we don't know what those are. Everyone knows what amalgams look like. Little crack here. This is a porcelain, one crown that I started doing. So you can see the difference in bonded restorations with the remaining teeth. But this will cause havoc in a person's mouth, not only because of whether they're fading or crumbling, but the electrical activity in a system will really put your whole system off. This is a very interesting principle that they use in homeopathy, but you can also apply it in a lot of other aspects in a living system, in a biological system. I use a lot of homeopathy, flower remedies, everything that's very high in dilution, very high in energy, has the strongest effect on a biological system. Moderate herbs, naturopathic remedies that act on the biochemical level, they are very helpful. Strong stimuli start having a negative effect, just like chronic heavy metal poisoning. They're not that strong that could kill you in a matter of days or weeks, but they are chronic. They will probably not kill you, but they will start acting as inhibitors of our enzymes and everything else in the system. The strongest, of course, will either kill you or paralyze you or block something, like narcotics or poisons. And of course, anesthetics somewhere. Yeah, anesthetics are poisons. They block a nerve from functioning for a little while until they're detoxified. So we try to keep their amount as low as possible. Coming back to amalgam, I just have to tell you that I never convince patients to replace their amalgams. I'm so lucky that I have beautiful patients who are educated, and I don't have to convince them about anything. And on the contrary, they actually sometimes want to educate me in what they have found in the latest literature, and it's just a constant interplay, a constant education in life. Coming to this beautiful substance, whoever collects gems, this is cinnabar. Mercury being locked, as I said, in Earth. Such a beautiful crystal, and a lot of other beautiful crystals in our Earth. Eventually, humans discovered how to extract, how to unlock those metals. So, being as beautiful as it is, even its element is very beautiful. It's fascinating. So people touch it, they play with it. It doesn't have too many uses. In the past, it was used as medicine, as treatment for syphilis, I think, and just as art. The fascination, even in movies, you see a Terminator 2, the liquid metal Terminator. It's very interesting. You just want to play with it. But it is your enemy. And by the time people realize that it's your enemy, it's not only within us that it's toxic, but it's in the environment. Consumers for Dental Choice, beautiful organization led by Charlie Brown, they are now leading and I think gaining a lot of ground in banning mercury because of the environment issue. If they can't get it out of our mouths, then at least get it out of the environment. some trivia on mercury. As I said, in the old days, it looked so fascinating that people swallowed it like pills, in pills. Amalgam basically is a solution of a metal in mercury. So now they used to extract gold using mercury, and they used to shake it and dissolve it and then evaporate the mercury. God knows what happened to those people who were evaporating all that mercury just to get the gold out. So they really formed an amalgam of mercury and gold to extract gold. So it is really not a true alloy. Amalgam is not a true alloy. An alloy is something set. It's, you can melt it and it forms back to its same alloy when it solidifies. So even if it's solid, it doesn't mean that it's a stable alloy. It's formed of gamma phases, and back in Germany, when we're studying the gamma phases of different combinations of the metal, one wasn't stable, one was more stable than the other. One broke down into this and this ingredient, so it's really not a very stable alloy. I'm not going to stay too much on amalgam. I think everyone has access on mercury toxicity. But even back in the 1880s, 1930s, people, dentists warned us that they were very toxic, but they were immediately stifled. Amalgam is a prosthetic device and not a drug, so we have absolutely no say in the medical effects it has on us because of that edict. I mean, ironically speaking, but it is still a paradox that we have to treat amalgam scrap as toxic while it's in our mouths and it's not toxic. I don't get it. Considering that there are no extreme factors at play as in our mouth. Temperature fluctuations, acids, chewing. For decades we chew on these amalgams. They have much more irritation and aggravation than anywhere in the environment. So why not just throw it somewhere and let it sit, since it's not going to be released. Some other trivia which has some relevance, meaning softening, because amalgam is a pliable material before it sets. So maybe that's how the word amalgam came about. We know this already. We're not going to debate it. IAOMT has very good references and research articles on amalgams, so I'm not going to talk too much about that issue. This is something that everybody knows. Mercury accumulates in the fetus. Dentists suffer the most. We know how it's released. It's really details right now, so I'm not going to stay on this too much. The battery effect we talked about. The more you aggravate a metal, its electrons are going to move back and forth, and the metal is going to corrode. It's going to turn into its salt form. The environmental issue. They are finding much more mercury in the oceans because all this mercury is being unlocked from the earth and diverted into the environment in more toxic form. That's the whole, just thinking out of that box. Thinking as in a different context. That's what's happening. I won't talk too much about these, just to remind you that zinc, selenium, and a lot of other metal salts, non-metallic forms of the metals, are very important in our survival. Without them, we wouldn't exist. And mercury will displace them from our bodies, and that's one way it will affect us toxically. Some clinical examples. There was a question whether we could know if there is mercury under a crown. This is one place where you could suspect that, but otherwise it's really hard to know if there's any mercury under a crown. But a lot of crowns will have mercury under them because dentists do not bother to remove the whole fitting when they're crowning a tooth. They just grind over it and crown the whole thing. These are the structural shortcomings of mercury. It's really the stone age of dentistry, 150-year-old technology, which hasn't come, we haven't come over it. We have the choice to, but we still don't, because of financial reasons mostly. So a filling that may look good, it's termed as serviceable filling by the ADA. We're not allowed to remove those ethically, but most of them harbor decay because they are not bonded and they shrink more, they contract more, they crack teeth, so they will eventually get leakage and bacteria under them. The expansion and the constant chewing on a weakened tooth, on a structurally weakened tooth, will cause the tooth to fracture into pieces, even if it's not falling apart. So a lot of times the mercury filling will stay in the tooth while the tooth is crumbling all around it. Because the mercury, the only way it can stay in is with undercuts. You have to drill unnatural undercuts in a cavity so that it stays. There are a lot of references on what symptoms we may have. I mean, I'm not going to go into symptoms too much. These are really factors that aggravate something. I can never say that something like mercury toxicity or galvanism will cause something, but it may have a large contributing factor. This is technically our physical bubble where we have metals acting as electrodes. They have to be removed safely using extreme precautions. Well, I won't go too much into that. I spoke about it last year, but I mean, you can go into a lot of websites and look up even the IAOMT. They have protocols which we also follow. Basically, we want to prevent mercury vapor and particles from going into the system.